Today on Let's Talk Love, I'm talking to Amy Chan, all about healing from heartbreak. Amy is the founder of Renew Breakup Bootcamp, a retreat that takes a scientific and spiritual approach to heal the heart. I just finished reading Amy's best-selling book, Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart, which is full of wisdom, tools, and guidance for breakup recovery. We talk about the heartbreak healing process, the different stages of separation, how to expand your emotional range, and also how to stop repeating unhealthy relationship dynamics. Amy is insightful, funny, and full of actionable ways we can navigate life through and after heartbreak. Enjoy. So happy to have our guest today, Amy Chan. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to dive in and talk to you about your book and talk to you about your boot camp, Renew Bootcamp. There's just so much work, beautiful work you're doing to help people with their heartbreak and breakups and heartbreak. I mean, we've all experienced this. But before we do that, I always ask my guests this question. I'm asking you, what in your life right now is giving you the most joy? And what is one of the challenges that you're facing in your life right now?
Oh, great question. What's giving me the most joy is, so I moved back to my hometown of Vancouver during the pandemic after living in New York for 8 years. And I've really invested in building community here. So, I went on friend dates to meet new female friends who are like-minded in similar stages in their career. I've invested in my old friends who have different paths. They have like a lot of children. They're married. But I've been doing these gatherings, and I actually just had a career shower where
Yes, I saw that. Yeah. I love that.
Because there's always showers for like births and weddings. I was like, well, how about the people who are getting promoted, who bought their own home, who started their own company? How about them? So I did a career shower, and it was just such a rewarding, fulfilling, heart connecting time. And it's something I'll be doing more. So that sort of stuff is bringing me a lot of joy.
Wow.
Yeah. The other side, which is more challenging, I would say, like, I don't really talk about this, but I'll just share with you, Robin. I've been in a relationship for 3 years, and we locked down together. We were only dating for 6 months, and we met in New York.
6 months and you were locked down. Wow.
Yeah. And he's born and raised in New York, and we moved to my hometown of Vancouver. And it's been so rewarding being in this partnership, but there's also challenges. And I'm a relationship expert, and sometimes I am really hard on myself because I feel like I should know all the answers, and I'm usually the one people come to. So it's a little hard for me to go to my friends and talk about it. So I would say that that's a challenge for me.
Yes. You talk about that I believe it is. I mean, I loved your book, Amy. I want to say I loved your book, and I learned so much from you. You know, I think when it comes down to what you said before, like your work is your work, right? But bottom line is relationships are challenging no matter what. Like it is just inevitable, really though.
Yeah.
But coming and being able to open up and be vulnerable about that space, you know, that you are in, and you're supposed to be this expert. Well, guess what? No matter what, it's going to be hard. So. And you know what? I just love that career shower idea. That is a beautiful, like just such a great thing to do. We got to celebrate a lot of milestones in each other's lives. Of course, not just babies and weddings. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about your Renew Bootcamp. So you started the world's first breakup bootcamp called Renew in 2016, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so can you tell us about that? Like, what is the Renew Bootcamp? You talk about this in your book, but really, what is it? And why did you start Renew?
Yeah. So when I was living in Vancouver, this was about 10 years ago, I was in a relationship, and I was on the path of happily forever after. And to me, back then, it meant date an entrepreneur, move in, get married, have kids, and I would work on the side for fun. And I was on track for that life. And that relationship fell apart, very suddenly, really dramatically. And I just spiraled. And it was just like the darkest time of my life. I had suicidal thoughts. I fell into depression, and I tried to do things like go to yoga retreats, but I found like it was just procrastinating my pain. And, it took me about 2.5 years to actually fully move through and process everything and get to a place where I'd really just accepted and let go. And I just thought like, well, what happens to those people who don't have friends that are going to lend them their couch to stay, and who don't have even an idea of where to start or what books to read or anything like that? What happens to them? Because I know for me, I was just a few bad decisions away from doing something completely destructive. And I was like, I need to do this. I need to create something where people can get away. It's beautiful. They're taken care of. It's luxurious, but they're also getting the specific type they need to deal with the grief of heartbreak, because it is very specific. And so that's where the idea of Breakup Bootcamp came. And what it is now, it's a 4-day retreat. It's always in nature. There's an on-site chef and team that's making sure you eat well. And there's a team of 10 different experts, from psychologists, behavioral scientists, anxiety coaches, sex therapists, who are there to teach you specifically on how to grieve and process in a healthy way. But not only that, it's never just about the ex. There's recycled pain. And so we really dive into what are the patterns and subconscious beliefs that have been kicking around way before this person, and how do we shift those patterns so that you don't just recreate the same emotional experience over and over again.
Wow. I love that. Like that you're giving people the 4-day experience. Yes, you're being pampered and taken care of. And having them led through this healing in 4 days. And that's why it's a boot camp, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't have that opportunity, but the people that do, I imagine that is just like, what an experience to go through. Yeah. So I've got a lot of quotes that I've quoted. Amy, we've shared so many quotes of yours on Instagram, and I've got a lot of more quotes in this podcast because they're just, it's so good. So one of the things you say, and is that the pain doesn't go away, it transforms. So you're like, we're not trying to just like, it's not about like being pain free, right? It's about changing and working with your pain. I'm not here to take away your pain. I provide tools to help you love through the pain. That, when you said, you want to love through the pain, I was like, oh, that's good. Your pain is a catalyst for change. You're not broken, you're bruised. Yeah. I love that idea about facing your pain and using it as a catalyst for change. So can you talk about that when you're, that's one of the things that in your book, you kind of break it down and say like, okay, when we're sitting, women, it's predominantly women that show up for these retreats, right, Amy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you're all in a lot of pain right now. So how is it that you're helping these people to use their pain as a catalyst for change?
Yeah, I think it's a process. And I think it starts with shifting your relationship with these feelings that many of us will judge as good or bad. So when we're sad or we're mad, it's very easy to be like, oh, that's bad. That's negative. But it's just being human, and our emotions exist for a reason. They are telling you something. And sometimes it's telling you something, it's replaying something historical, but regardless, if we can just stop trying to run away from the emotions, distract them, judge them, and just sit with them, be curious with them, not slam or shame yourself as good or bad, weak or strong. Just be like, oh, this is very human. I'm just expanding my emotional range. And it really shifts the energy of this thing you're trying to escape. Versus, okay, what can I extract here? How can I sit with it? And you basically do learn going through something so hard. You learn so much about yourself. You learn so much more about how resilient you really are. And through that pain, there's something there that's helping you grow and evolve. When I went through my darkest time, of course, I didn't think, oh yeah, one day I'm going to use this. I'm going to be the founder of a breakup bootcamp. I'm going to dedicate my whole life to that. I didn't think that at all. I'm like, I'm going to die. But now I have just such a different relationship with pain. So even now when I go through hard things or I lose something or life takes a pivot, I don't get destroyed anymore. I know that, I can learn something here. I can grow. I have enough evidence that one door closes and eventually another one opens. I might not know what that is, but I'm okay with the uncertainty. And that is a skill. You grow that muscle.
It is a skill. It's, we're going to get into this, but that's one of the skills that you teach in your retreats as well as your book is reframing.
Yeah.
And that is a really important skill. So one thing you did allude to just a little while ago was with your breakup, your breakup that, was very traumatizing and sudden and all these things, is that it's the plan, right? And you say, I love the story you tell about, when this one group that you led in retreat, that you were all sitting in a circle and you realized, you noticed that they all had one thing in common. And that was, in their heads, they all embraced a linear relationship model, which is so incredibly, come on. I was like that with my, with my first marriage. I'm remarried now, but when I was 29 years old, I was like, okay, I have that model in my head. And a lot of girls, women, females can, people in general, like, doesn't matter what gender, I think we have this idea that our plan in life, okay, I'm going to meet this person, fall in love, get married, have children, work on our career. It's just like this linear path, right? And if your path is broken, it's unsuccess. Your plan is success, right?
Yeah.
And if that plan meant enduring abuse, sacrificing your own needs, losing yourself in the relationship, well, so what do you say about that, Amy? Right? I think this is just too common, is that we all have this plan. You're attached to it.
We're almost indoctrinated into this plan through the stories, the media, the fairy tales. And look, I think things are different now, but we still have the same version of the same story, right? Whether it's Cinderella, waiting for their prince, whether it's Carrie Bradshaw waiting for Mr. Big to come around, whether it's Bridgerton convincing the guy, like it's just packaged up in different ways, and there is a story. Whether it is the celebrations we have for women, which are bridal showers and baby showers, right? It's this constant in different areas coming at you that to be a woman, to be a successful woman, is to follow these timelines that by this age you have this, and then this, and then this. And if you don't have it, then there's something wrong with you. And it's just simply not that, and I think that I would say one of the biggest lessons I learned from that breakup was I was all about the plan, all about control. And I've now embraced that you have no idea what's going to happen, even if you plan it out. And like, all you can do is build resilience and know that you have the tools to get back up, and that you're not going to stay down there in this crazy intense pain. Like, it will eventually get better. You can do things to help yourself. And they're not permanent states of misery. And it's just part of life. It's full of pivots, and you're the author of this story. I make this comment when I'm at the retreat. I ask the women, I say, if you had a choice, say you were able to choose the life you wanted, you could choose, I want this life or this life before you came into Earth. And the life A was, okay, every day you're going to wake up, you're going to eat the same thing, you're going to work a 9 to 5 job, you're going to go to Hawaii once a year for every single day till you die. You will have no pain, you will have no conflict. That's just going to be your life. Or would you choose option B? had some hardships, you overcame them, you became an overachiever in school, and then you started this company, and then you got hurt, and you wrote a book, and then you came to Breakup Bootcamp, and then you learned from a dominatrix, and then you dated someone just for fun. Like, which story would you choose? And they're like, oh yeah, well, obviously I choose B. Right? We wouldn't choose the boring story where nothing happens and we're never hurt. What type of life would that be? And so I really encourage people, you're just an author. Each one of these things, they're chapters. If something blew up in your face, not according to plan, all right, you'll learn from that. You'll start another chapter.
Yes. Letting go of the plan, I think, is just so important for all of us.
Yeah.
Because So this quote, I love this. It's about strength. Strength is the practice of opening your heart even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Yeah. I think we can shy away from wanting to experience that pain. Is to confront the pain with compassion and curiosity, even when it feels much easier to avoid, distract, or suppress. Yeah. Strength is to allow the feelings to expand your emotional range. Yeah. So how is it that we can, what does it mean to expand your emotional range? Because obviously people in heartbreak are in this, it is so incredibly painful, viscerally. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your heart, that's for sure. Your mind's doing all these crazy thinking, all this crazy thinking in circles and making up a lot of stuff and focusing on a lot of the pain. Uh-huh. What do you teach about expanding your emotional range?
Yeah, I used to really hate that I was very sensitive. And I was told by people that I was too emotional or too intense and too much. Men told me that. And if you think about the greatest singers, Celine Dion, Adele, they are incredible at their craft because they have such a wide range. And I think the same thing is to be human, is when we're feeling the depths of despair and grief, when we feel the highs of joy and love and excitement, it's expanding your emotional range. It allows you to feel more. Yes. But if you just restrict yourself to only these set of emotions, which you deem is okay or acceptable, you also hinder your ability to feel the other side of the emotions. Mm-hmm. And so to be human is to feel. And now I'm like, what an honor that I get to feel that, because the very fact that I have a lot of emotion, that I'm sensitive, that I'm intense is my gift. It's not something to be ashamed of. And even sometimes when my boyfriend will go oh, don't cry. I'm like, no. You should be honored to be witnessing these tears. This is amazing.
I think that's a common thing for a man to say to a woman, I don't want to see you cry. I don't let's stop. And it's almost I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to make you feel a certain way. It's right. Well, I am hurting right now. It's okay, but I'll get through it. But it's just you can't prevent me from getting hurt. Something, you know what I'm saying? Protecting us in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of similar to the guys who said to me you're too sensitive. You're too emotional. That wasn't my problem. That was, you actually are uncomfortable witnessing and being in the presence of these emotions. And so instead of acknowledging that or even being aware of it, you've turned it around and made it something that was defective in me. Absolutely not. That's garbage.
Yes, it is garbage. So when you're, heartbreak is very similar. When you're going through, heartbreak, it's you teach that it's it is really like grieving a love. You are grieving a loved one. You're grieving a relationship. You're grieving what you had with that person. And it is grieving. So it's like losing somebody that's passed away in your life that you loved very much, right? And so there's different stages. And so the process is helping people understand that, you know what? You need to go through all these stages. It's I learned, my twin passed away. My dad passed away very soon after. And it's I did go through the stages of grief, and I didn't skip any. I went straight. I hit it head on. But what I did learn about grief is if you're going to try to bypass any of those stages, it's going to come and get you no matter what.
Yeah.
It could be years down the road. And like all of a sudden you're like, you didn't grieve. Okay. Well, now's your time. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's how some people get stuck in heartbreak because they're not going through the stages.
Right. There's no release and processing and instead it is like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. I'm going to shove it down. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to reach for this vice to not feel it. I'm going to numb it out. But like you said, it just catches up to you, and it usually catches up and it blows up like a volcano at some point. And so, and like with heartbreak, you're grieving many things. You are grieving the relationship. You're grieving probably your best friend. You're grieving the future you will now not have. You are grieving a part of your own identity. And sometimes too, your ego is grieving of like, oh, maybe they're going to be with someone else, or maybe there was infidelity. So there's that grief as well. It's so much grief stacked on top of one another. Of course, it's going to be overwhelming, but that is part of the stages. It's part of the shock stage, and you eventually do move through them. And it's not linear. You might jump back and forth between different ones or feel multiple ones at the same time. But yeah, it's so important to allow yourself to go through it, and not shame yourself for feeling those feelings.
So the different stages that people will go through, can you go through those, Amy?
Yeah. So there's shock, which is really your body's way of protecting itself because it helps you not get so overwhelmed too quickly by the new reality. You then go into denial, which is like, oh, maybe it's going to be okay if I just did this, or maybe, it's going to be fine. And you kind of like don't want to accept the reality once it's sinking in. And then eventually you accept the reality, like, oh my gosh, this is done. And that's when typically you go into depression, but it's situational depression. So it's because of the situation, not because you have depression. Mm-hmm. After depression is anger. Anger is actually a very helpful stage. So it shows that energy is moving, and it really launches you out of depression and into action. So typically anger makes you realize there's been an injustice, or there's been a wrong that needs to be righted. Maybe there was a boundary that was crossed. And this propels someone to be like, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? I'm going to go back to the gym now. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to stop just crying in fetal position. After anger is a stage called bargaining, which is very similar to denial. And that's when, again, we're like, well, maybe it wasn't so bad. The missing comes back and the withdrawal comes back, that you can really easily rationalize, like, oh, okay, it's okay. I'll just get back together. And sometimes people are stuck in bargaining for a while. They get back together, until they do it enough times and they're like, oh, the same thing is going to keep happening, which then launches them into what I call, accountability. So accountability is when you start, instead looking at, oh, how am I a major player in this? What can I do? What did I do? What can I do differently? The conversation starts to shift from they, them, psychoanalyzing them, to yourself. And then you get into acceptance, where you're like, you fully accept that the relationship is over. It doesn't mean that you don't have residual feelings. It doesn't mean that you're not going to miss a person, but you are not in denial anymore. You're in reality. You know that it's done, and you're prepared to take the steps to move forward.
Yes. So you talk about, and it's funny because just a few weeks ago I interviewed Guy Winch, who is also an expert in heartbreak. I mean, a lot of his work is centered around heartbreak. Yeah. And he talks about, yes, there's the physical that's going on in your body, and there's so much, and you talk about this in your book, is the physiological. Mm-hmm. What your brain is going through is so painful, like in your brain, right? Mm-hmm. And how your brain is going through withdrawal. Yeah. You're used to being, and there's like this dopamine, like, so you go into the there is so much science around this, right? Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, about how physiologically you're going through it, the heartbreak?
Yeah. So Dr. Helen Fisher did a really interesting study on the brains of people who are newly separated, and they actually scanned their brains. And what they found was the same part of the brain was activated as a drug user feeding for a fix. So the summary was that, wow, like after a separation, your brain is like, looks like a drug addict. And so you're in withdrawal. You're feeling these withdrawal symptoms. And another thing is, when you're in the relationship, you're used to getting these feel-good chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, these bonding chemicals. And so after a separation, even though logically you know it's over, your body is like, what the hell's going on here? Like, they didn't get the memo. And so it's going to cause you to take action to go and get it. So that's why you might have this urge to check their Instagram stories, or to text them, or to reread old text messages, or even psychoanalyzing in your brain. It's still giving you some access to them. And so understanding what's going on in your body and in your brain and in your nervous system is helpful, because if you're not aware that these things are going on, you're going to think that you're crazy, but you're not crazy. Your body's going through this process. It needs to reach a new equilibrium, and it's going to take some time, but that intensity will eventually it'll hit its peak, and then it'll start to minimize.
Yes. So something you talk about, I love this. You say that it's about shame, right? And you say shame can be toxic, painful, and even deadly. Among the women who come to Renew, shame is a central theme of their suffering. So, I can relate. I think a lot of us can relate to this, right? It's like you feel shame. Like, let's just say you're married and you've got children, and it's like, I never planned for this, like, to get divorced in my life. Are you kidding me? Like, that was never part of my plan. And it's like so incredibly devastating. And I'm so full of shame around that, right? That'd be one example. But what are some of the reasons the women are feeling shame? What other ways is that showing? How is that showing up?
I think a common way it's showing up is this belief that there's something wrong with them. So because it didn't work out, because their partner cheated, the story becomes very personalized of like, oh, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not sexy enough. I'm not this enough. And that's where a lot of the shame comes from. It's this fundamental feeling that I am flawed and I am broken and there's something wrong with me. The second part of it is, I think people who will come to Breakup Bootcamp, it self-selects. So it's typically a very high achieving group. And high achievers are very used to being able to fix problems. You want to hit a goal, you do ABC and you get the goal. And with heartbreak, it's just not like that. You can do A, B, and C, and you'll still be reeling from the pain. And so there's this almost impatience and self-blame and shame around not being able to just bounce back and getting back into it. And, you know, there's this lack of gentleness and compassion that they have with themselves.
And that is what you say. The antidote to shame is self-compassion and kindness towards oneself, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that is internal. Like your shame is internalizing and like blaming yourself, really. Yeah. Right. Whereas, and then there's blame, right? And then there's this other, state of thinking is like, okay, when you blame, this is another quote of yours. When you blame, you're shackled to the person who hurt you, giving that person the keys to your emotional freedom. This was like, I thought about this. I'm like, that is so true, because if you're blaming somebody, you are literally still attached to that person. You are like, it's like, and blame keeps your recovery dependent on the actions of another person. Yeah. Something that you ultimately cannot control. The powerlessness keeps you in a state of suffering. So yes, so there's the shame that people can be in, the blame, and then you want to move into reframing.
Yeah. I say this often, like if you are still blaming your ex, psychoanalyzing your ex, hoping for your ex to change, hoping they're going to come back and just give you closure, you're still in a relationship with your ex. You're just in a relationship with someone who's not in a relationship with you. And
Yes.
blaming is very interesting because, it's like hot potato with your emotions. It's like you feel this thing and you don't want to feel it. So you throw it at them. And it's like, it's your fault. You did this. And it might even feel temporarily relieving, but it just keeps you hooked on this relationship, right? It's the last part of the relationship you've got left. And so you might vilify your ex and blame them for being a narcissist or a psychopath or whatever it is. And now I don't mean to say like there's some situations where there's abuse and someone's done something totally terrible. And it's not that they shouldn't take accountability and that somehow they're right. I'm not talking about that.
No.
But I am talking about this holding on to this emotional charge about what this person did or did not do. And there's a point where it just is not serving you and it's keeping you stuck in the past. And so I think with reframing, part of what we teach is looking at the current relationship narrative that you currently have. And I have the people come do this. They have to write out the relationship narrative, just like they were telling a friend for the first time. And then I teach them about cognitive distortions, these thinking traps that we're privy to, their judgment errors that cause us to amplify pain, depression, sadness, anxiety. And, a few, for example, is all or nothing thinking. You say, they always do this. This never happens to me. It's actually just not true. It's not factual. Generalizations, personalization, being caught up in shoulds, having these arbitrary rules that people should be following, or even yourself. And when they're broken, you feel like there's this big injustice and that they owe you something. All of these are thinking traps. So the second part of the exercise is once they learn these, they have to circle all of the thinking traps that are in their story. And there's usually a few go-to ones that they tend to do. And then they have to rewrite their story without the thinking traps, with just the facts. And what they find is the story ends up being a lot less emotionally charged, and you're actually dealing with reality. And then we have a starting point to start healing, because if you're constantly not grounded in reality, it is very hard to heal.
Absolutely. You tell that story. You tell a story about your own breakup, your breakup from your partner, and how you were with another friend, and you were saying all these things about your ex, right? And your friend turns to you and says like, "Okay, Amy, is this story serving you?" And you're like, no, I don't think so. It's really not helping me, right? It's not helping me anymore. Yeah. And then that was when you went home and you wrote on big stationery this letter to your ex, right? And how it was really reframing, because it was like this light switch on like looking at, actually your friend was like, okay, well, tell me, what are the really good things that you had in that relationship? What were good things about that he brought, the gifts and the good things, the good times you had? Yeah. And the good things that you did together, and all of the positives, because most relationships have, of course, both. Yeah. We could be so stuck in the pain and the negativity around it that all you can see is the bad things about that person. But there's so much more, right? Yeah.
And that's another cognitive distortion. It's called negativity bias, where we just zero in, we have a narrative of they're a villain, and we will find all the data to support that narrative, that we don't see anything else. And that can actually really cause a lot more suffering.
Yes. So Amy, I'm sure this is like maybe day 1 or day 2, right? In the retreat, or if you're going through this healing, somebody reads your book and they're going through the different stages. And let's say, okay, they're in the acceptance stage. They're now like feeling like, okay, I've really done the work here. I'm feeling better I've done my reframing. I sure as heck don't want to make the same mistakes in the next relationship that I don't want this to be a repeat with a different person. Right? So those are the skills that you're also teaching. Is you say sometimes a breakup is the shakeup you need to redirect your life, and in order to design your next relationship in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this was something that I really resonated with, or just this idea that we show up different ways in our relationships. So I think there was like 7 different ways that people can show up in relationships, right? Like there's the overachiever, which is like, can we go through those, Amy? Like a few of them,
Yeah.
go through all of them. But I think that this was like, oh, I could totally see this. It was like, okay, I'm this and I'm this. And
Yeah.
I could see somebody, it's like one of my friends, oh, she shows up like this. Or, I just think that we show up in different roles.
For sure.
And what the core of that means for us.
Yeah. I mean, one I see a lot is the overgiver. And,
Yes.
I would say 85% of the people who come to Breakup Bootcamp are overgivers. And, there's a lot of resentment. Now, if you pull back the layers of that, the root of why people overgive is generally, they learn at a very young age, a belief, I'm not worthy. And so to be worthy, they have to overcompensate and they overgive. Usually it's not just in romantic relationships. They're usually the one taking on more stuff at work. They're overgiving with their friends. And there's this constant feeling of resentment. So there's 2 things happening there. There's an old belief, a subconscious belief that's causing them to behave in certain ways. And as a child, that might have been what they needed to do to survive. They didn't have other tools. But as an adult, if you look at the results and you're like, oh, wait, this is causing me a lot of dysfunction in my relationships, then it's time to be like, okay, we need to learn a different coping mechanism because that's maladaptive. And the second thing is we can be addicted to emotions. And so I know for myself, I used to be an overgiver, and the emotion I used to be addicted to is resentment. And so I have to, even to this day, look, when I'm feeling this, like I'm imbalanced, my natural tendency, because I've done it for so long, is just to put my foot on the gas pedal and give more. And I have to stop myself and be like, wait, let it balance out, express your needs, communicate, receive someone who's trying to give to you. And also ask myself like, oh, is the root of this giving? Is it actually coming from a place of abundance and generosity? Or is it coming from a place of fear, insecurity, and scarcity or control? Because it could be a present wrapped in the same wrapping, but the root energy changes the outcome. So you might think you're giving, but you're actually taking because the root of that is coming from scarcity. So, we can blame our partners and be like, oh, they were such a taker. But if it's happening across the span of your relationships, well, there's a pattern there. And until you start to work on that and start making small changes on a daily basis, you will just attract a similar partner who will wound you in a similar way because your psyche is trying to change its ending.
Yes. Wow. So another one would be the pleaser. Right?
Yeah.
So you bend over backwards for your relationship, for other people. You've adapted to becoming a doormat.
Right.
And underneath all of that, and you prioritize others before yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the root of that would be like, I'm not worthy of love.
Yeah. So the root of that also could have been a childhood where it was not safe to voice your needs. So maybe your caregiver, just didn't take your needs seriously and, or shamed you for expressing what you wanted. So it was not safe for you to express yourself, and you adapted to that, to be over accommodating and to edit yourself and never rock the boat. And so, yeah, that's like another thing that shows up. So you become this people-pleasing person, and then sometimes it's like not that your partner is this evil person who's trying to take advantage of you,
No.
but you're also setting a precedent in the relationship. So they get so used to you taking care of everything and they can sit back. They're like, okay, I'll just do this.
Yes. So it's changing these, it's changing this pattern and the way you show up. Like, it's just really, it's so much about learning about yourself and how you are in relationship. So that it is much more balanced, and it's coming from this place of, self-love, self-assuredness, confidence, your inner strength. So how does somebody even identify where how you're showing up in relationship, Amy? Like this is all.
So yeah, I think one of the exercises we do is we look at what is like the belief that's kicking around. And a lot of times it's not even conscious. So, this exercise is in the book. It's also what I do at the boot camp. I read out a bunch of the different beliefs. I have everyone close their eyes, and there's usually one that kind of stands out. They'll kind of physically feel it, and we'll work on that. And then there's a process of shifting that belief, almost like you're climbing a ladder, one rung at a time. You don't go from I'm not worthy of love to like everybody loves me. And, despite the Instagram codes that tell you just repeat affirmations like that, your brain will it can actually do more harm. Your brain will inherently reject what it doesn't believe is true. So if your belief is I'm not enough, the updated belief that's a little bit more true, a little bit more helpful could be, there are some people that I trust who accept me for who I am. And you just want something a little bit more true, a little bit more helpful. You look for evidence of that being true. You try on that belief, like you're wearing a new colored scarf, seeing how you feel in it until that becomes your new baseline. And then you go, okay, now what's a rung up from this? And you just keep going until you reach your desired goal belief. And it's a process that works, right? But it happens slowly and gradually, one rung at a time.
Yes. So I love the section in your book that talks about, okay, now you're ready to date again. So, but this, you want to do this in a very, a clear way. Okay. Like you talk about like this idea about soulmates. Okay. Forget about the soulmate shopping, right? Like soulmate shopping is a surefire way to stay single, avoid your intimacy, and eventually walk away from relationships the moment the sparks fade. Yes. I love that, right? And then you talk about chasing unicorns, which I think, oh my gosh, it's like this idea. And I think this is just so common, right? It's like you want to convince yourself that even if this person shows up and they're like the unicorn, but they're going to change. You just stick around and things will change. So you have that really good story that you're sharing me about chasing unicorns, right? It was a 2-year long distance relationship. And you talk about unicorn confirmation bias and soulmate idealizing. And in the end, this person he says to you, you just weren't relationship material. Oh my gosh, Amy, like I think anybody could relate to this story. Like, can you just quickly go through that story? Because I think we could all learn from that.
Yeah. So I met this guy at Burning Man. And I saw him and I just knew, but like, let's be honest here. I knew who he was before I met him because he was a big tech entrepreneur. And so, I think I just still at that time wanted to be someone's plus one. I didn't have these things in my life. At that point, I was working a job I didn't really like. I was pretty broke living in New York, and I meet this guy who's like a multimillionaire, who's an entrepreneur who everyone respects. And so, it was really easy for me to like soulmate bells are ringing. And we weren't even in a relationship. Like I was in a relationship with him in my head. He was in a relationship with me. And like, for over 2 years, like we would see each other here and there sporadically, spontaneously, but they were always peak experiences. Like, a Michelin star dinner, like some crazy fast adventure. So there are always these highs, but we never had reality together. So everyone else was bland compared to him because this person was my unicorn. He was my Mr. Big. And I created in my head this idea of who he was, this idea of what our life would be. And, it just wasn't based in reality. So and then eventually he ends up, I always thought he wasn't ready to be in a relationship because he was going through a lot. And I was like, oh, okay, you're not ready to be in a relationship right now. All right, I'm just going to stick around and wait it out and prove through my loyalty to someone who wasn't even loyal to me. Then you'll eventually pick me and hand me the rose. What the heck? No, it didn't happen.
Yes. But you were willing to stick it through because you said right, I think this is just, you were convincing yourself that actually, it's going to work out. And you're shocked when he's like, well, you're not, I didn't think you're relationship material. What? Right? So let's talk about reciprocation, because I think this is when it comes down to it, it's such a simple thing to actually understand. But in the dating world, you really, and if you're let's just say you're with somebody in a relationship, like if there's, first of all, even just dating, let's just get down to the bones of it. There should be reciprocation, especially in the beginning, right? Or just throughout. But I think this is something that a lot of people will actually just not even consider. You're putting so much in and you're not getting what you deserve or what you need back. Right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to quote one of your psychologists, one of your life coaches, Trish Bareilles.
Yeah.
This is okay. I love this quote. She says, hope will fuck you. Have hope for humanity. Have hope for world peace, but do not have hope for a person to change. You cannot hope your relationship into existence.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
So what are some signs of reciprocation that are important to have in a budding relationship? I mean, really, like, let's just go through just some basics, like that you definitely need to have in the signs in a budding relationship of reciprocation.
Yeah. So there is, an initiation to see you and make plans. That's not just a last minute thing. Sometimes last minute, okay, but that's not the precedent. There's some cadence of communication. Now, people have different communication styles, but there is some sort of a consistency. It doesn't mean it has to be every single day, depending on where you're at in the relationship, but it's not, they don't just disappear for 2 weeks. That's very odd behavior, and it's not a good sign. And I think this is something like you have to be really honest with like kind of your internal balance, because if you tend to veer more as an overgiver or a people pleaser, what will happen is it might start off even, you take one step, they take one step, and then, maybe you start liking them a lot. And then you take 2 steps, they just take 1. Then you take 3 steps, they just take 1. And then you're like, oh, well, I just double my steps to make up for their lack of steps, hoping they're going to come around and realize how amazing I am because I made them banana bread, whatever. And that's where you have to really fight your kind of natural instinct to want to put your foot on the gas pedal and give more and just give it space. I'm not saying cut the person off, right? It doesn't mean that they're evil or they're a fuckboy. Like, it just means like there are power dynamics. And my boyfriend actually said this to me. He's like, cause I asked him, I'm like, in the past he was single and, I think that he was in these casual relationships. And I was like, well, why are you not doing the same thing with me? And he's like, well, if you think about power, if say there's 100%, if someone's already coming with 80%, you only leave me 20. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like that really resonated. I was like, it's really true. So if you're already like, okay, I'm going to like change, I'm going to make it really easy so that you can see me. I'll change my schedule so it's on yours.
Yeah.
I'll, drive an hour to see you. I'll bring a gift. I'll make it all convenient. You're going in 80, 90%. They only have 10%.
Yes. Yes. I really like that. And that feeling of being like, just even you saying it that way though, I myself, I'm like, ugh. Like you just feel like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel good that they're just accommodating you 100%. Yeah. And you're just having, right? You just feel like, oh no, back off a bit, back up, give me some space.
It's the same thing with friends though, right? These dynamics happen also in friendships.
Yes. Yes. True. Okay. We're running out of time, but okay. I just want to make one more really quick point about, which I loved is like, and I've heard this before and I've said it before in that looking for a partner, you've got to treat it more like looking for a job. And I love this analogy. It's, you say, okay, like, let's say you lose your job and okay, now you're on the job hunt. Okay. I'm looking for an awesome career and I'm not just going to jump into the first one. I need to like take my time, check out the market and what's going on, in prospective places I want to work at. What career paths can I take? And you're not just going to like, let's say you get a second stage, interview, you're not going to like let go of all the other, prospective jobs that you're looking at. And it's the same thing with dating.
Yeah.
I really liked that. Like you can't, and you say when you start off in scarcity mode, you're going to be a lot more desperate and will likely take a bad deal and not negotiate your terms.
So true, right? If you like, it's the same, like if you have zero savings, you're going to take the first thing that you can get. But if you start to save up, and I think this translates in life, if you start to work on building your confidence, doing things that are more self-nurturing and can build up your reserves of self-love, it's going to change what offers you'll even accept, right? Your standards start to change. When you have options, your standards raise.
Yes.
So like, you know, and I don't mean like you have to get to this place of like, you're totally healed and you're in self-love Ireland. No, that's also unrealistic. But there is, you know, some foundation of feeling worthy. And so I really do recommend to people, if you keep having these relationships that are unhealthy and, falling apart, then maybe your next thing you do, don't just do the same thing. Maybe you just take some time to like really work on the foundation. And then after you've built that up just even a bit, then see, because that's going to shift who you're drawn to and who's drawn to you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Amy, I can't believe the time has gone by so fast. I love talking to you, and I like the work you're doing is amazing. Helping people, you know, work through their heartbreak, and really at the end of the day, create, you know, you don't have to go into the next relationship. It's about building yourself back up. And then if, eventually, if you do want to be back in a relationship, it's like doing it differently, possibly, and creating something that you'll be strong and happy in. Yeah. So where can people continue to work and follow you and learn from you? On your website and in your boot camps and your book?
Yeah. So renewbreakupbootcamp.com is my website. My book is Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. And my Instagram is at Miss Amy Chan.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you on our IG Live next.
Yeah, this was so fun.
It was so fun. Amy, thank you. One of my favorite quotes that you've said is, this is really good. It's, you don't want to fall in love. You want to stand in love. I love that. So thank you, Amy, for being with us. And I look forward to our Instagram Live and just continuing working with you for sure.
Awesome.
And thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Please visit realloveready.com to become a member of our community. Submit your relationship questions for our podcast experts at reallovereadypodcast@gmail.com. We read everything you send. Be sure to rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us get you the relationship advice and guidance you need. The Real Love Ready podcast is recorded and edited by Maya Anstey. Transcriptions by Otter.ai and edited by Maya Anstey. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage everyone listening to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well.